The Galactic Empire was vast, ancient, and utterly undefeated. Its rule spanned thousands of star systems, its military strength was unmatched, and its conquest of weaker species was a tradition older than many civilizations themselves. Among the many species that had crumbled before the might of the Empire, there were countless warriors, powerful in their own right, but ultimately inferior to the Emperor's vast legions. Some fought with honor, others with strategy, but none had ever truly posed a challenge. So, when the name humanity surfaced within the Imperial Council chambers, the reaction was laughter. "They are barely worth the effort," scoffed Grand Strategist Vargath, his crimson exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's dim light. His 6 mandibles twitched as he addressed the gathered warlords and nobles. "What species, tell me, would ever wage war by avoiding it entirely? Their history is riddled with treaties, negotiations, and cowardly diplomacy. When war does come, they hide behind machines, drones, and long-range weapons. They do not stand and fight like true warriors." Others nodded in agreement. The humans were a minor species, discovered only a few centuries prior, confined to a small pocket of the Orion Arm. Their homeworld, Earth, was an unimpressive blue-green planet, and their expansion into space had been slow compared to the rapid dominion of true galactic powers. Yes, humans had fought wars, but their history spoke of an inherent unwillingness to face their enemies directly. They preferred sabotage, deception, and prolonged conflicts where their enemies simply collapsed under the weight of economic and psychological strain. That was not the way of the Empire. In the eyes of the warlords, humanity was beneath notice. Not because they were particularly weak, there were weaker species still, but because they lacked the one thing the Empire valued above all, honor. The Empire had long followed the philosophy that war was a sacred act, a proving ground where the strong asserted their dominance. Their finest warriors relished the chaos of the battlefield, their towering dreadnoughts crushed planets beneath their orbital bombardments, and their legions took pride in facing their enemies head-on. Humans, on the other hand, were ghosts on the battlefield. They fought indirectly, sniping from the shadows, hacking enemy communications, and poisoning supplies instead of standing in open combat. It was disgusting. "Let them exist in their little sector," Vargath declared, dismissing the humans with a wave of his clawed hand. "They pose no threat to us. They are too fearful to wage war, and their existence is nothing more than a stain on the honor of true warriors. If they ever dare stand against us, we shall crush them before they even realize they are at war." For years, the Empire ignored humanity, treating them as an amusing anomaly rather than a serious civilization. They were dismissed, mocked, and ridiculed among the Empire's ruling class. And then, as if to confirm the Empire's low opinion of them, the humans did something entirely predictable: they pleaded for peace. The Empire had extended its reach to the edges of human-controlled space, absorbing neutral territories and disregarding Earth's formal complaints. The humans protested, sending envoys, letters, and formal declarations begging the Empire to respect their borders. It was pathetic. "We should conquer them just to put them out of their misery," one warlord joked, earning laughter from his fellow commanders. "They send words instead of fleets. What an embarrassment to their own kind." Then, one fateful day, the Empire's expansion brought them to the human colony of New Terra. A modest planet, New Terra was a thriving outpost with vast cities, trade hubs, and a growing human population. It was nothing special to the Empire, just another stepping stone in their eternal conquest. And so, without much thought, the Empire sent a fleet. Not a full invasion force, just a scouting party, a handful of ships with a few thousand warriors, meant to test the humans' response. It was expected to be effortless. The attack was swift. Imperial forces descended on New Terra, burning settlements, overwhelming security forces, and broadcasting their victory across human space. The colony was crushed within hours, and its distress signals were jammed. No reinforcements arrived. Another conquest, another victory for the Empire. But something was wrong. The humans, despite being vastly outgunned, didn't fight like the Empire expected. There was no desperate last stand. No grand sacrifice. Instead, they simply vanished. Entire cities were abandoned in minutes, their inhabitants disappearing into the wilderness without a trace. Imperial patrols searched the ruined streets, scanning the empty buildings, but there were no civilians, no armed resistance, just silence. It was as if the planet had exhaled and removed all signs of life. At first, the Imperials assumed the humans had fled in fear. Another confirmation of their cowardice. But then, the reports began. Isolated patrols were being wiped out in the dead of night. Not in battle, but silently. Soldiers disappeared from their posts, their weapons still in their hands. High-ranking officers were found dead in their quarters, their throats slit without any alarms being triggered. Then came the messages. Written in blood on the walls of captured Imperial bases, in perfect galactic standard. The Boogeymen are coming. The Empire had no idea what it meant. Some dismissed it as desperate psychological warfare, the last attempt of a dying people to invoke fear in their conquerors. But then, a new transmission came from Earth. It was not a plea. Not a surrender. It was a single word, transmitted to a hidden, elite branch of the human military, buried deep within Earth's black-budget war programs. A word that had not been used in centuries. Unleash. The Empire had spent years laughing at the humans, dismissing them as weak and cowardly. They had no idea what they had just done. Commander Zel Torak of the Imperial fleet stood on the bridge of the battleship Vorax Roth, watching the planet below. New Terra, once a thriving human colony, now lay in ruins. Smoke still curled from shattered buildings, and Imperial forces moved through the wreckage, securing their hold on the world. It should have been a moment of victory. Instead, something was wrong. Where are the prisoners? Torak growled, his mandibles clicking in frustration. The officer beside him hesitated. We are still searching, Commander. Torak's 4 eyes narrowed. Searching, he echoed. You took this colony 3 days ago. Where is the population? The officer shifted uncomfortably. We estimated at least 4 million humans lived here. But we have found less than 50,000. And there are strange reports from the ground forces, sir. Torak exhaled sharply. Strange? The officer hesitated again, as if ashamed to speak. Our patrols are disappearing, Commander. Not in battle. They just vanish. Squads go out on routine scouting missions and never return. We send reinforcements, and they find nothing, no bodies, no wreckage, no signs of a fight. It's as if the planet itself is swallowing them whole. Torak clenched his fist. Nonsense. The humans fled like the cowards they are. Probably hiding in the forests, waiting to die. But then the officer pulled up a holoscreen. Security footage from Outpost Theta 7. Watch this, he said. Torak leaned in as the grainy footage played. An Imperial barracks at night. A squad of 12 soldiers stood at their post, rifles at the ready. Then, in the span of 3 seconds, the lights flickered. The cameras glitched. And when the video resumed, the entire squad was gone. Their weapons lay on the ground. Their armor was still there, standing upright, as if their bodies had simply vanished into thin air. Torak felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. This was no ordinary resistance. Something else was happening here. The first bodies appear. By the end of the week, the disappearances had increased tenfold. Entire platoons lost contact. Command stations went silent. The Empire deployed elite hunter-killer teams to track the enemy down. But those teams stopped reporting in as well. Finally, something was found. A transport ship sent to resupply the Ragnarok 12th Legion, an elite Imperial unit stationed in the mountains, landed at the base. But when the doors opened, the crew recoiled in horror. The Ragnarok Legion was dead. Not just dead, slaughtered in silence. Their bodies were arranged in perfect rows, their throats cut with surgical precision. Their weapons were stacked neatly beside them, unused. No alarms had been triggered. No distress signals had been sent. On the walls of their bunker, a single message was carved in their own blood. We are the things that go bump in the night. The Empire responds. Fear began to spread through the Imperial ranks. Soldiers whispered of an invisible enemy, one that did not fight like normal warriors. There were no battle cries, no open skirmishes, no demands for surrender. Only death. In desperation, the Empire declared total war on humanity. Thousands of warships and millions of soldiers were mobilized to New Terra, determined to crush whatever resistance remained. The Grand Strategist himself, Vargath, arrived to oversee the extermination. But it made no difference. The more forces they sent, the faster they disappeared. The true horror begins. At first, the Empire assumed the humans were using some kind of advanced cloaking technology. The idea of them being mere warriors, mere men, was unthinkable. But then, one survived. A lone Imperial soldier, found wandering the wastelands in shock. His armor was covered in blood, not his own. His breathing was ragged, his eyes hollow. They took him to interrogation. When questioned, he said nothing. He only rocked back and forth, muttering a phrase over and over. The Boogeymen. The Boogeymen are real. Vargath slammed his fist into the table. What is this nonsense? But then the footage arrived. Helmet cam recordings from an elite Imperial kill team, the Thalnok Shock Troopers. The best of the best. They had been sent into the forest to root out the humans. The footage showed them moving carefully through the trees, night vision scanning the terrain. Then, one by one, they began to drop. No gunfire. No explosions. Just shadows moving between the trees. Unseen hands dragging them into the darkness. Their screams barely lasted a second. Then silence. The last few minutes of the footage were of the team leader, breathing heavily, his weapon shaking as he turned in circles, trying to find the enemy. Then, a whisper, directly into his comms. You're already dead. The screen cut to static. The Boogeymen are here. Panic gripped the Empire. Vargath himself, once the most arrogant warlord of the fleet, began to feel the creeping tendrils of fear. He ordered planetary bombardments, leveling entire cities just to be sure no humans were hiding there. He deployed drones, war beasts, even psychic hunters, but nothing worked. The Boogeymen could not be tracked. Could not be reasoned with. They were everywhere. And they were inside the Empire's mind. Imperial soldiers stopped sleeping. Some committed suicide rather than go on patrol. Others fired their weapons at nothing, seeing ghosts in the dark. One officer, before taking his own life, carved a final message into the wall of his quarters. They are watching. The final blow. Desperate, Vargath issued a planetary evacuation order. He would abandon New Terra and regroup. But the moment he transmitted the command, the Imperial fleet system shut down. The entire planetary defense network, hacked. Weapons disabled. Escape routes cut off. And then, for the first time, the Boogeymen spoke. A single, encrypted message appeared on every Imperial console, written in perfect galactic standard. You called us cowards. Now you will understand fear. That night, the Boogeymen made their final move. By morning, Vargath was missing. His guards were dead, their bodies arranged in a mockery of an Imperial victory parade. The Empire's flagship, Vorax Wrath, exploded in orbit, without a single distress call. The war was over. Not because the humans had defeated the Empire in battle, but because they had broken them without ever truly fighting. The horror spreads. The few Imperials who survived New Terra spoke in hushed voices, telling tales of an unseen force that hunted them like prey. They called them ghosts. Shadows. Nightmares made flesh. But among humans, they had a different name. They were the American Boogeymen. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The Imperial fleet that had once surrounded New Terra was in full retreat. Not a strategic withdrawal. Not a calculated repositioning. A full-blown, panicked exodus. What had begun as an overwhelming invasion force had been reduced to a shattered, fleeing remnant. Imperial warships, once the pinnacle of military dominance, abandoned their positions, desperate to escape an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't fight. The survivors refused to speak. The officers who had commanded entire legions now trembled in silence, haunted by what they had witnessed. Even the most battle-hardened warriors of the Empire, those who had raised entire civilizations, were broken. Fear had seeped into their bones. Yet, despite the retreat, the Empire still clung to its pride. The High Emperor, Zanvolka the Eternal, refused to believe the reports. This is a failure of discipline, he snarled, watching the broken officers kneel before him in disgrace. His 4 golden eyes burned with fury as he addressed the Imperial Council. We are the greatest force in the galaxy. You dare tell me that a minor species, one that does not even span a full quadrant, has forced us into retreat? One of the kneeling commanders dared to raise his voice. His words trembled. My Emperor, they are not warriors. They are something else. Something worse. We never saw them coming. They didn't attack us in battle, they hunted us. The fleet was haunted. Entire ships lost contact without a single distress call. We tried to reinforce positions, but by the time we arrived, our men were already gone. Their weapons, untouched. Their bodies, missing. My Emperor, we do not know how to fight them. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. He turned to Grand Strategist Vorlok, the only officer who had not fled New Terra. He had remained behind to observe. And yet, his own hands were shaking. Vorlok cleared his throat. We need new measures, my Emperor. Conventional tactics will not work. We are not dealing with an army. We are dealing with something far worse. The Emperor scoffed. Then find me warriors who are not afraid of shadows. But the truth was, fear had already infected the Empire. A war of ghosts. As the fleet limped back to Imperial space, things only got worse. It started small. Murmurs in the dark. Imperial soldiers stationed at listening posts along the border began hearing whispers in their comm channels, messages in their own tongue, but in human voices. You are already dead. At first, the officers dismissed it as psychological warfare. Some form of human hacking, perhaps. But then, the station crews began disappearing. No alarms. No signs of forced entry. Simply gone, their weapons and armor left behind. Entire ships vanished overnight, without any battle, without any wreckage. Log entries recovered from their black boxes revealed that the crew had begun hallucinating before their final transmission. One message stood out. A recording from the captain of the battleship Dread Sun, moments before its entire crew disappeared. They're inside the ship. I hear them breathing. But the doors are sealed. The sensors detect nothing. And yet, I feel them watching me. This is not war. This is a nightmare. The transmission cut off. The Dread Sun was never seen again. The breaking point. The Emperor ordered full-scale war. He wanted Earth destroyed. But the problem was, they couldn't find it. Every attempt to locate human homeworld coordinates ended in failure. Spy probes sent to track their movements were hijacked mid-flight. When the Empire sent deep space recon teams, those ships never returned. The humans weren't just winning the war. They had removed themselves from the battlefield entirely. And yet, they were still attacking. High-ranking Imperial officers were being assassinated in their own fortresses, deep within Imperial space, where no human ship had ever been detected. Entire legions were found dead, their bodies stacked neatly, as if arranged by an unseen force. Not a single shot had been fired in resistance. And then, the nightmares began. At first, it was isolated. Soldiers reporting visions of shadowy figures lurking in their rooms. But then, entire fleets became affected. Captains, admirals, even members of the Emperor's own royal guard reported the same dream. A group of human warriors, faces obscured, standing in a dark void. They did not speak. They did not move. They only watched. 4 hours. Until one of them, in a whisper barely audible, said, "Run." The soldiers who had these dreams never woke up the same. Some refused to sleep at all. Others collapsed into catatonic fear. Many simply disappeared. Without a trace. The Boogeymen take the throne. The Emperor tried everything. He declared martial law across the Empire. Yet, no matter what they did, the Boogeymen were always one step ahead. Finally, the Emperor grew desperate. He ordered the Vault of Shadows, the Empire's most secret intelligence division, to use psychic interrogators to find the source of the Boogeymen's power. The result? Every single psychic interrogator was found dead within an hour. Their bodies untouched. Their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. And in their blood, scrawled across the walls. "We see you." The final collapse. The High Council begged the Emperor to surrender. But he refused. He could not accept that an empire spanning thousands of years could be broken by an enemy they had never even faced in battle. Then, one night, the palace fell silent. The guards stationed outside the Emperor's throne room reported hearing nothing. No movement. No voices. Not even the faint hum of machinery. The next morning, they forced the doors open. The Emperor's throne was empty. His ceremonial armor was left neatly folded on the seat. His 4 golden eyes had been removed, placed carefully on the Imperial banner as if to mock him. And in the center of the chamber, scratched into the floor in deep, perfect lines, was the final message. We were never hiding. We were already here. With the Emperor gone, the Empire collapsed within weeks. Worlds declared independence overnight. Military factions tore themselves apart. The once invincible Imperial fleet crumbled from fear alone. And humanity? They never spoke of the war. It was as if nothing had happened. No official records. No declaration of victory. Just silence. But in the deepest, darkest corners of the galaxy, a whisper remained. A warning passed from conqueror to conqueror. A name that no warrior dared speak aloud. The Boogeymen. The once mighty Galactic Empire lay in ruins. Without the Emperor, the Imperial fleet fractured into warring factions. Planets that had once been loyal declared independence overnight, realizing the invincible war machine they feared was now vulnerable, hollowed out by something far worse than war. Fear. It had taken centuries for the Empire to rise. It took weeks for it to collapse. Former Imperial warlords tried to seize power, but they too fell. Not to rebellion. Not to assassins. To silence. Every warlord who attempted to seize the throne was found dead in their chambers, their personal guards still standing at attention, unaware their leader had already been killed. Even the most isolated strongholds were compromised. Entire fleets vanished into the void, their distress signals never reaching friendly ears. And the whispers continued. You are already dead. The remaining loyalists. Deep in the Vorgath Nebula, one of the last strongholds of the Empire remained. A hidden fortress known as Darkspire, where the remnants of the Imperial High Command had retreated. They were not warriors. They were bureaucrats, strategists, and scientists, those who had never held a rifle in their lives but had ordered the deaths of billions. They believed they were safe. Darkspire was a fortress world buried beneath 10 kilometers of solid rock, surrounded by a minefield large enough to destroy a fleet, and guarded by millions of the Empire's remaining forces. No force had ever breached it. But when the Grand Minister of War awoke one morning, he found his security teams dead, their throats cut with precision. His personal defense droids, offline. The vault doors, still locked from the inside, but the bodies of his elite guards stacked neatly at his bedside. The words were carved into the steel walls in perfect galactic standard. We were never locked out. You were never locked in. And in that moment, the last loyalists of the Empire understood the truth. There was no war anymore. This was a purge. And no one was safe. A new power rises. With the fall of the Empire, a power vacuum consumed the galaxy. Rival species that had once cowered before Imperial fleets now saw an opportunity to rise. But something was different. Humanity had won. Yet, they had not claimed a single world. They did not take slaves. They did not build new governments. They did not even announce their victory. They had erased an empire without firing a single shot in open battle. And now, the rest of the galaxy was afraid. Who were the Boogeymen? Where did they come from? What did they want? But no one dared ask. Because those who did, were never seen again. The Silent Dominion. At the edge of the galaxy, near a starless void where no ships dared travel, a station existed. It had no official designation. No known coordinates. Yet, inside, they watched. The figures in the dark, their faces concealed behind blank visors, their weapons crafted in absolute silence. Ghosts in human form. These were not soldiers. They were something worse. The Boogeymen were not a military. They were an idea. A force that moved unseen, shaping the fate of the galaxy without ever announcing itself. They did not rule through might. They ruled through fear. And for the first time in history, the galaxy had an empire that did not want to be known. Humanity did not need to conquer. They had made fear itself their domain. And it was absolute. The fear that never fades. The galaxy was quiet. Not the peaceful silence of a world at rest. Not the stillness of deep space. This was a different kind of quiet. The quiet of fear. The Galactic Empire had collapsed. Its fleets lay abandoned, its worlds fractured into lawless territories, its citizens unwilling to speak the truth that lingered in every shadow. There was no war. No invading force. No demands for surrender. Yet, every species knew, the Boogeymen were still watching. And they would always be watching. The unseen rulers. At first, some believed that humanity had simply withdrawn after their victory. That perhaps they were content to let the galaxy rebuild itself, to let new rulers rise in the absence of the empire. But as the months passed, as political leaders attempted to restore order, a horrifying realization set in. No new empire would be allowed to form. No new warlords would rise. Every attempt at restoring large-scale governance, every species that tried to seize power, disappeared. One by one. And it always happened the same way. First, there would be a whisper. A faint, electronic transmission intercepted in the depths of space. A single phrase, spoken in galactic standard. Do not build what we have torn down. Then, the silence. A week would pass. No ships lost. No battles fought. And then, entire planetary capitals would vanish. Not bombed. Not razed. Simply gone. Millions of beings, erased overnight. No bodies. No destruction. Just emptiness. It was as if the Boogeymen did not kill their enemies. They removed them from existence itself. The Ghost Fleet. In hushed whispers, across the ruins of the once mighty empire, a new legend took shape. A name that no one dared say aloud. The Ghost Fleet. A force of ships that did not register on sensors. That left no wreckage, no bodies, no signs of engagement. Merchants traveling between systems spoke of seeing shadows in the void, distortions that should not have been there, shapes in the darkness where there should have been nothing. And then, moments later, ships would vanish from their convoys. No explosions. No distress signals. Just empty void where they had once been. Some captains sent messages before they disappeared. Most made no sense. They spoke of breathing in the walls. Of whispers in the airlocks. Of figures standing on the hulls of their ships, where no life should have survived. And then the final transmissions, always the same. A single phrase, spoken in voices not their own. You were never meant to rule. The last emperor's secret. The final mystery of the empire was uncovered by accident. A scavenger crew, looting abandoned imperial strongholds, stumbled upon a locked archive. A data vault so deeply encrypted that even imperial intelligence had been unable to access it. They managed to force it open. And what they found should never have been seen. The vault contained records older than the empire itself. Documents from civilizations long since erased from history. Worlds that had never been conquered by the empire, because they had been eradicated before the empire even existed. And all of them shared the same warnings. Warnings of a force that did not conquer. That did not claim land or demand tribute. A force that only did one thing. It erased. And the final message in the archive. The last transmission sent by Emperor Zanvulka before he vanished. It was barely decipherable. Static and distortion filled the audio. But his last words were clear. We were never rulers. We were only caretakers. Watching something we could never understand. We thought we were predators. But we were always prey. We should never have gone to Earth. Then silence. And a single set of coordinates attached to the message. The truth about the Boogeymen. The scavengers made a choice. A foolish one. They followed the coordinates. It led them to the edge of the galaxy. To a place where no stars burned, where no systems had ever formed. A void that should have been empty. But it wasn't. A structure floated there. A station, ancient beyond reckoning, black as the void itself, absorbing all light. It had no markings. No symbols. But when they got close, their ship died. Every system, every function, shut down. And in the silence, they heard the whisper. A voice that did not come from their ship. A voice that did not come from their comms. A voice that came from inside their own minds. You were never meant to see us. And then, they disappeared. The unseen war. The galaxy continued. Life went on. But the truth remained buried. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not risen to power. They had simply revealed what had always been lurking beneath the surface of reality. And now, the Boogeymen were awake. Their war was not one of conquest. It was a culling. A war that had been fought since the beginning of time. A war against something older than civilizations. A war against the rulers of fear itself. And in that war, the rest of the galaxy was just collateral damage. No new empire would rise. Because the galaxy was no longer theirs to claim. It belonged to the shadows now. The Boogeymen had become something else. Something beyond human. Something beyond understanding. And in the cold, endless void of space, a final whisper echoed across the stars. We were never hiding. We were already here.